Your pathetic human shuttle looks like a tin can with an engine strapped on, sneered Lyra, as the Trill warship's imposing hull filled the view screen of the small United Earth diplomatic craft, its puny frame dwarfed by the alien dreadnought bristling with advanced weapons. You must be lost, because there's no way a ship that primitive is on a diplomatic mission to the glorious Trill Empire. Mark gritted his teeth as the arrogant Trill commander's mocking laughter crackled over the comms. He knew the simple shuttle looked unimpressive next to the Trill's mighty warships, but he had hoped their mission of peace would be enough to secure safe passage to the Trill homeworld. Apparently not. This is the UES Envoy, a diplomatic vessel from Earth on a peaceful mission to establish relations with the Trill Empire, Mark transmitted, keeping his voice level. We have no hostile intentions. I respectfully request that you allow us to proceed to the coordinates we were given by your government. Ha! You expect me to believe that load of bosh? Lyra scoffed derisively. If this flying scrap heap is the best Earth has to offer, then we have nothing to fear from you pathetic humans. Allow me to show you what a real warship can do. Horror seized Mark's gut as the Trill ship's gun ports snapped open and swiveled to target the helpless envoy. Wait! We're unarmed! What are you— The rest of his warning was lost as a barrage of energy beams and missiles slammed into the envoy, nearly shearing the small ship in two. Bulkheads buckled, control panels exploded in showers of sparks, and Mark was thrown from his chair as the deck heaved beneath him. Alarms blared, and acrid smoke choked the air as the battered shuttle listed drunkenly, venting atmosphere and coolant from a dozen rents in its hull. Lyra, cease fire immediately! Mark shouted, dragging himself back to the flickering comms panel. This is an act of war! Around him, his battered crew scrambled to put out electrical fires and tend to the wounded. At least 3 of them lay unmoving, blood pooling around their shattered bodies. The Trill Empire fears nothing from lowly humans, especially not in ships as ridiculous as yours, Lyra gloated. This was merely a small demonstration of our superiority. Now prepare to be boarded and your crew taken as prisoners of the Trill. The comms cut out abruptly, leaving only the moans of the injured and the shriek of tortured metal. Mark slammed a fist against the bulkhead in frustration, his mind racing. The unprovoked Trill attack had crippled his ship and injured or killed over half his crew. Lyra seemed intent on capturing them, and Mark knew they couldn't hope to outrun the massive Trill warship, let alone fight it. Their weapons were gone, their engines failing, comms knocked out. They were sitting ducks. But Mark also knew that if the Trill succeeded in taking them prisoner, Earth might never learn of the Empire's blatant aggression in time. His ship's logs would show they were attacked without cause, but that evidence would be erased if the Trill seized the envoy. Lyra's prideful recklessness could be the spark that ignited a catastrophic war between the Trill and humans, one that Earth was not yet ready for. Mark had seen the intelligence reports back home of the Trill Empire's vast militaristic might and tendency toward conquest. As humans expanded out into the stars, colonizing world after world, it was only a matter of time before they butted up against Trill space. Many had hoped diplomacy could diffuse tensions before war erupted. Now it seemed the Trill were determined to make the humans their next target. Determination hardened in Mark's chest as he pushed himself to unsteady feet. The envoy's mission of peace may have failed, but he would not allow his crew to be captured, nor Earth to be caught unawares. He had to find a way to escape Lyra's trap and warn humanity, even if it meant sacrificing himself and his ship. Otherwise, the Trill warship looming over them might only be the vanguard of a deadly armada poised to engulf Earth in the flames of war. As the crippled envoy drifted helplessly, ensnared by the ancient station's tractor beam, Mark knew they had only one chance at survival. He turned to his crew, their faces etched with a mix of fear and drive. We have to get aboard that station. It's our only hope of escaping the Trill. Using the shuttle's last fading pulse of engine thrust, they brought the battered craft near the station's exposed airlock. Suiting up in EVA gear, Mark led the way, his magnetic boots clanking against the envoy's buckled hull. Inside the derelict station, an eerie stillness greeted them, broken only by their own labored breaths in the helmets. Jack, the ship's engineer, scanned the alien architecture with his handheld device. This technology, I've never seen anything like it. It's centuries beyond the Trill or us. They pushed deeper into the station's maze-like corridors, revealing chamber after chamber filled with advanced machinery, sprawling data cores, and dusty laboratories. In one cavernous hangar, sleek alien spacecraft sat dormant, their enigmatic curves hinting at mind-boggling propulsion capabilities. Mark glanced nervously at the blood-splattered bandage around Jack's midsection, a grim reminder of Lyra's cruelty. Can you access their systems? We need to call for help before the Trill find us. With a determined nod, Jack set to work, his fingers flying over the alien control panels. Hours bled together as they deciphered the cryptic symbols and interfaces. Finally, a flicker of light filled the room as a holographic star map blinked into existence. I'm in, and I've found their comms array. If I can just boost the signal? Jack muttered. He worked feverishly, rerouting power and aligning transmission dishes. With a crackle of static, the array hummed to life. Mark stepped forward, his voice steady as he recorded the fateful message. This is Captain Mark Brenner of the UES Envoy. We were attacked without provocation by a Trill warship and forced to take shelter in an ancient alien station. The technology here is beyond anything we've encountered. We need immediate assistance. Transmitting coordinates now. As the distress signal raced across the stars to the nearest United Earth outpost, Mark and his crew continued exploring the station's wealth of alien secrets. In dimly lit research labs, they pored over schematics detailing propulsion engines that could cross galaxies, energy shields that could withstand supernovas, and weapons capable of erasing continents. But as they delved into the aliens' history, an unsettling pattern emerged. They found cryptic allusions to a ruinous civil war and escalating destruction, despite incredible technological progress. Video logs showed once great cities disintegrating in radioactive flame. Mark exchanged a worried glance with his crewmates. Were they witnessing a grim portent of humanity and Trill's future path? On Trill's homeworld, Lyra seethed in his chambers, brooding over reports of his humiliating defeat against the primitive humans. How dare they make a fool of him? They would pay in blood for besmirching his honor. His fellow commanders, sensing Lyra's instability, spoke to him in placating tones. But Lyra would not be swayed. He summoned his most fanatically loyal captains, and in secret bade them assemble a war fleet. He would hunt the humans to the very edge of the galaxy and grind their bones to dust beneath his warship's hull. Light years away on Earth, Admiral Blackwell read Mark's plea for aid with growing alarm. He immediately put the fleet on red alert and scrambled the closest battle group. If the Trill obtained the alien station's advanced tech, he shuddered at the thought. They had to secure it first. The UES Retribution and her escorts leapt into slipspace, racing for the coordinates Mark transmitted. But even as hope kindled in Mark's chest at the thought of rescue, a more pressing dilemma weighed on him. The awesome power of the alien weaponry and defenses could swing the balance of galactic dominance to whichever side wielded them first. Should he offer them to Earth now, despite the risk of destabilizing their already tenuous position? Or keep them hidden until humans were ready to harness such potential responsibly? As the Earth fleet and Lyra's rogue armada converged on the ancient station, missiles primed and cannons charged, Mark knew the moment of truth had arrived. The battle's outcome would shape not only his crew's fate, but that of both human and Trill civilizations. On the precipice of annihilation or a new destiny, everything hung on the razor's edge, and the decisions made in the next crucial hours. The final confrontation was at hand. As the Earth battle group hurtled through space towards the ancient alien station, Admiral Blackwell paced the bridge of the UES Retribution. His comm panel lit up with an incoming transmission from the station. "Admiral, this is Captain Mark Brenner," came the voice, crackling with static. "We've made an incredible discovery here. The technology on this station, it's beyond anything we've ever seen." Blackwell leaned in, his voice low. "What kind of technology are we talking about, Captain?" Mark hesitated. "Weapons that could vaporize planets, sir. engines that could cross galaxies in days. But we've decided not to activate any of it yet. The consequences could be catastrophic if we're not careful. The Admiral's brow furrowed. I understand your caution, Brenner, but withholding this from Earth's military is a big risk. Are you sure about this? We are, sir. We've seen hints of how this tech destroyed its creators. We can't rush into using it. Blackwell nodded slowly. Very well. I'll trust your judgment for now. We're approaching your position. We'll take up defensive positions around the station and avoid engagement unless the Trill fire first. As the Earth fleet surrounded the ancient station, the Trill Armada appeared on long-range sensors. On the bridge of his flagship, Lyra gathered his most loyal officers. Those human vermin made fools of us, he snarled, banging his hand on a console. Today, we will crush them utterly. Then we'll seize that station's power and reduce their pitiful homeworld to ash. His officers exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared speak against their unhinged commander. Inside the alien station, Mark and Jack worked feverishly at unfamiliar controls. I've got it, Jack called out, rerouting power from weapons to shields now. The station hummed as an iridescent barrier shimmered into existence around it, encompassing the Earth fleet as well. Admiral Blackwell's voice crackled over the comms. Trill fleet in visual range. Opening hailing frequencies now. This is Admiral Blackwell of the United Earth Navy, he transmitted. Your forces committed an unprovoked attack on one of our vessels. We demand an explanation and urge you to stand down immediately. Lyra's sneering face appeared on the screen. Explanation? Here's your explanation, human. Your pathetic species is unfit to exist in our galaxy. Today, we eradicate you. This is madness, Blackwell replied. We came here in peace. There's no need for... Spare me your cowardly pacifism, Lyra spat. All ships, open fire. Wipe these vermin from existence. A barrage of missiles and energy beams lanced out from the Trill ships. But as they struck the shimmering barrier, they simply vanished, without effect. Report! Blackwell barked. Sir, some kind of energy shield is protecting us, his tactical officer replied, amazement in his voice. The Trill weapons aren't even scratching it. On Lyra's bridge, panic set in as volley after volley dissipated harmlessly against the barrier. Impossible, Lyra raged. Keep firing. Concentrate all weapons on their flagship. But it was futile. Meanwhile, the Earth fleet's return fire tore through the unshielded Trill ships, leaving burning hulks in their wake. Lyra watched in disbelief as several of his ships broke formation and fled. Cowards! He screamed. Stand and fight. I'll have you all executed for this. But his remaining loyalists were helpless against the impenetrable shield. And now weapons emplacements on the alien station itself were powering up, targeting Lyra's dwindling forces with pinpoint accuracy. The station's control room erupted in chaos as Lyra's flagship barreled towards them. Mark's fingers flew across alien consoles, desperately searching for a way to stop the impending collision. He's gone mad, Jack shouted, eyes wide with panic. Mark's gaze locked onto a pulsing blue orb. He slammed his palm down, activating the station's tractor beam. The massive Trill warship jolted to a stop, suspended mere meters from impact. Got you, Mark muttered, sweat beading on his brow. On the flagship's bridge, Lyra snarled in frustration. He punched commands into his chair's console, overriding safety protocols. If I can't have victory, neither will they, he roared. A hatch opened beneath Lyra's feet. He plummeted into an escape pod, the hatch sealing shut behind him. The pod jettisoned from the doomed ship, rocketing away. Mark's eyes narrowed as he tracked the pod's trajectory on the alien screens. With precise movements, he adjusted the tractor beam's focus, ensnaring the tiny craft. Not so fast, he growled. Mark redirected the station's weapons. Lances of golden energy sliced through the frozen Trill flagship. The massive ship disintegrated piece by piece, reduced to floating debris. Using the tractor beam's pinpoint control, Mark guided Lyra's battered pod through the station's airlock. The hatch hissed open, revealing the Trill commander. His once pristine uniform was torn and stained. His eyes darted wildly as human security personnel dragged him from the pod. Admiral Blackwell's stern face filled the main view screen. "This is Admiral Blackwell of the United Earth Navy. Your forces are in full retreat. Stand down immediately or face total annihilation." The Admiral's finger hovered over a button. "We have your disgraced commander in custody. Surrender now, or we'll transmit his coordinates to your homeworld. I'm sure they'd love to get their hands on the fool who started this war." Silence stretched for agonizing seconds. Then, a chorus of confirmations flooded the comms as Trill ships powered down weapons across the battlefield. Blackwell turned to Mark, his expression grim. "Captain, this station's power is beyond anything we imagined. With it, we could crush the Trill Empire once and for all, ensure Earth's galactic dominance for centuries to come." Mark shook his head, gesturing to the ancient data cores surrounding them. "Sir, that's exactly what destroyed this station's creators. If we go down that path, we'll only repeat their mistakes." He pulled up holographic schematics, intricate designs for reality warping technology dancing before their eyes. "But what if we use this power differently? Not to conquer, but to make war itself obsolete?" Blackwell's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "We create a stalemate," Mark explained. "Use this station to enforce peace between our civilizations. Any act of aggression would be met with overwhelming force from this neutral party. It's mutually assured destruction on a galactic scale." The Admiral paced, considering the implications. An uneasy peace, perhaps, but peace nonetheless. He nodded slowly. "Very well, Captain, make it happen." As Lyra was led away in restraints, Mark turned back to the alien controls. The fate of two civilizations now rested in his hands. Hands. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him as he stood before the station's main control interface. "Initiating final system calibration," Jack announced, his fingers dancing across holographic displays. Mark nodded, watching as streams of data flowed across the screens. The molecular disruptor cannons, reverse-engineered from alien technology, were being integrated into every human and Trill warship. Admiral Blackwell's face appeared on a nearby monitor. "Captain, are you certain about this course of action?" "It's the only way, Admiral," Mark replied, his voice steady. "We can't risk another war. This system will ensure peace, even if it's an uneasy one." As they spoke, technicians swarmed over docked vessels, installing the new weapons systems. Inside a nearby hangar, Mark watched a team carefully mount a disruptor cannon onto a human cruiser. The sleek, alien-derived weapon looked almost organic, its surface rippling with barely contained energy. "Final safeguards are in place," Jack reported. "Any attempt to arm or fire these weapons will immediately trigger an alert to the opposing side." Mark turned to a secondary console, activating a galactic map. Countless points of light blinked into existence, representing the defense platforms now scattered throughout human and Trill space. "Defense network online," he murmured, "stasis field generators at full power." Admiral Blackwell's expression remained skeptical. "And you're sure these platforms can lock down entire systems?" In response, Mark keyed in a series of commands. On a nearby view screen, a shimmering energy field enveloped a small asteroid. In an instant, the tumbling rock froze in place, suspended in an unbreakable stasis lock. "Nothing gets in or out," Mark stated flatly. Days turned to weeks as the new deterrence system came fully online. Mark stood vigil in the station's control center, monitoring the fragile piece. Occasionally, alarms would sound as rogue elements tested the system's limits. A proximity alert blared. Mark's eyes snapped to a tactical display, showing a Trill warship charging weapons near a human colony. "Engaging countermeasures," Jack called out. Before the Trill vessel could fire, it vanished in a flash of light. Seconds later, it reappeared, completely immobilized within a stasis field. "Crisis averted," Mark breathed, allowing himself a moment of relief. As the years passed, such incidents became increasingly rare. Human and Trill ships began to mingle peacefully in shared space lanes. Trade flourished between the once warring species. Yet even as prosperity spread, Mark sensed a growing undercurrent of discontent. He paced the station's corridors, past the chamber where Lyra and his followers hung suspended in stasis, frozen in time as a living warning. A joint human-Trill research team had taken up residence in the station's laboratories, poring over the ancient alien data cores. Mark paused at a window, watching them work. They sought to unlock the secrets of the station's creators, hoping to understand the source of such godlike power. Decades slipped by. Mark's hair grayed, but the peace held, until the day alarms blared once more, not from external threats, but from within. "Sir," Jack's voice crackled over the comm. "We've got widespread rioting on Earth. They're calling themselves neo-sovereigntists. They want the countermeasures shut down." Mark rushed to the command center, bringing up feeds from major Earth cities. Crowds filled the streets, waving signs denouncing the oppressive deterrence system. "This is madness," he muttered. "Don't they understand what's at stake?" Before he could fully process the situation, another alert sounded. This time, it was from Trill Space. Hardline factions were demanding equal control over the alien technology, claiming humans had rigged the system against them. Mark slumped into a chair, the weight of decades of enforced peace suddenly threatening to crush him. He had created this system to end all wars. Now, it seemed poised to ignite a conflict that could tear both civilizations apart from within. He looked up at the swirling galactic map, countless worlds now teetering on the brink of chaos. The deterrence system that had kept the peace for so long now hung in the balance. Mark knew he had to act, and quickly, before everything he had worked for. Mark stood in the Unity's command center, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of the alien dreadnought. The massive vessel loomed before them, its hull scarred and pitted from ancient battles. He took a deep breath, steadying himself for the task ahead. "All teams prepare for boarding," he announced over the ship-wide comm. "We're going in." The Unity's docking umbilical extended, latching onto the derelict's airlock with a metallic clang. Mark led the way, his mag boots clanking against the deck as he stepped into the alien ship. The air was stale, filled with the acrid scent of decay and scorched metal. As they moved deeper into the vessel, emergency lights flickered to life, casting an eerie blue glow across the corridors. Mark's team, a mix of human and Trill personnel, moved cautiously, their helmet lights sweeping across alien script etched into the walls. "My God," whispered Dr. Alara, a Trill xenobiologist. "Look at the size of these corridors. These beings must have been enormous." They passed through a cavernous chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness above. Twisted metal and shattered equipment littered the floor, evidence of a fierce battle fought long ago. Mark's hand tightened on his scanner as they approached the ship's central core. The command center doors hissed open, revealing a sight that made even the most seasoned crew members gasp. Alien bodies, preserved by some unknown technology, sat frozen at their stations. Their elongated limbs were stretched towards control panels, faces locked in expressions of horror and desperation. "Fan out," Mark ordered, "but don't touch anything. We need to document everything exactly as we found it." As the science team began their analysis, Mark's security detail reported in. "Sir, we found something. You need to see this." He followed them to a heavily fortified section of the ship. Inside, a massive sphere pulsed with a faint, sickly light. The antimatter warhead. "It's still active," the chief engineer reported, his voice tight with fear. "After all this time." Mark's mind raced as he processed the implications. He activated his comms, connecting to the Unity. "Begin decoding those data logs, now." Hours passed as the teams worked feverishly. Mark paced the command center, surrounded by the ghostly alien crew. Finally, a breakthrough came. "We've got it," Dr. Alara announced, her voice trembling. "The final log entries. It's worse than we imagined." The truth unfolded before them. The Dreadnought's mission of genocide. The crew's rebellion. The catastrophic detonation that sealed their fate. As the last pieces fell into place, Mark felt a chill run down his spine. He stared at the alien captain, forever frozen at his post. "They destroyed themselves," he murmured, "just like we almost did." The weight of history pressed down on him. The deterrent system he had created, meant to ensure peace, now seemed a fragile barrier against the darker impulses of both humans and Trill. As the Unity prepared to return home with its grim discoveries, Mark knew that the true test of their civilizations was yet to come. Mark Wright stood before the assembled human and Trill leaders aboard the Unity, his face etched with the weight of their recent discoveries. The cavernous conference room hummed with tension as he activated a holographic display, projecting images of the derelict dreadnought they had explored. What you're seeing is the result of a civilization's reliance on absolute deterrence, Mark began, his voice steady but grave. A warship capable of destroying entire star systems, frozen in time as a monument to its creator's hubris. He zoomed in on the pulsing antimatter warhead, still active after millennia. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. "This is where we're headed if we don't change course," Mark continued. "Our deterrence system has prevented open war, but at what cost? We're breeding the same paranoia and extremism that doomed these aliens." Admiral Chen of Earth's United Navy leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Are you suggesting we dismantle our only safeguard against Trill aggression?" From across the table, Trill Archon Vex bristled. "Typical human arrogance. Your kind has always been the true aggressors." Mark raised his hands, silencing the brewing argument. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. We're locked in a cycle of mistrust that will only escalate." For hours, the debate raged. Human and Trill representatives traded accusations and counter-proposals. Mark stood his ground, presenting evidence from the alien logs that showed how their doomsday weapons had ultimately sealed their fate. As tempers flared, Mark slammed his hand on the table. "Enough! Look at yourselves. We're on the brink of repeating history. We need a new approach." Slowly, painfully, a compromise emerged. The deterrence platforms would remain as a last line of defense, but most of the system-wide safeguards would be deactivated. A coalition of neutral species would form a peacekeeping force to monitor both sides. "This isn't perfect," Mark admitted as the final votes were tallied. "But it's a start. We can begin to build trust, to see each other as neighbors rather than enemies." In the years that followed, Mark watched with cautious optimism as humans and Trill began to intermingle. Trade routes opened. Cultural exchanges flourished. For a time, it seemed they had averted disaster. But on a rainy evening in his office aboard the Unity, alarms blared. Mark's heart sank as he read the incoming reports. On the human colony of New Eden, bombed-out Trill shops smoldered. Families huddled in fear as xenophobic mobs roamed the streets. Before he could fully process this, another alert flashed. Trill space erupted in chaos as rival factions clashed. The transmission cut in and out, but Mark caught glimpses of burning cities and warships exchanging fire in orbit. He slumped in his chair, the weight of failure pressing down on him. The peacekeeping coalition's comm channels lit up with frantic chatter. They were powerless to directly intervene without risking full-scale war. Mark stared at the galactic map, watching as more and more systems destabilized. He had to find a way to contain this powder keg before it exploded. But how? The very tools he had created to maintain peace now tied his hands. As reports of violence and unrest continued to pour in, Mark knew he was racing against time. The fragile peace he had worked so hard to build was unraveling before his eyes. He had to act, and quickly, before the situation spiraled completely out of control. Mark's eyes darted between multiple holoscreens, each displaying a fresh horror. On one, the smoking ruins of New Avalon's Trill Cultural Center filled the frame. Another showed frantic evacuation efforts as terrified Trill civilians scrambled onto transport shuttles. "Sir, we've got another explosion at the spaceport." Jack's voice crackled over the comms. "Sovereign Front suicide bombers hit the main terminal. Casualties are extensive." Mark's fists clenched. "Deploy all available peacekeeping units to New Avalon immediately. Priority is protecting the remaining Trill population centers." He turned to face Admiral Chen, whose face was ashen. We need those Sovereign Front leaders in custody yesterday. How the hell did we let this happen? Chen shook his head. We underestimated their reach, their resources. They've been building support among the fringe elements for years. A priority alert flashed on Mark's personal comms. It was the Trill High Council demanding immediate action. Mark steeled himself and accepted the call. Archon Vex's face appeared, contorted with rage. This is an act of war, right? If your government won't strike these human terrorists, we'll do it ourselves. Archon, please, Mark pleaded. We're mobilizing every... The transmission cut off abruptly. Mark's blood ran cold as he saw why. On another screen, chaos erupted on the Trill homeworld. Warships loyal to General Threx rained fire on the capital city. Get me a direct line to Threx, Mark barked. Hours passed in a blur of violence and desperation. On New Avalon, peacekeeping forces engaged in brutal street-to-street combat with Sovereign Front extremists. Orbital strikes lit up the night sky as entrenched radicals were blasted from their strongholds. Mark watched in horror as a convoy of Trill evacuees came under attack. Sovereign Front ambushers poured weapons fire into the transports, forcing them off the road. Peacekeepers rushed to intervene, but not before dozens of hostages were dragged from the wreckage. On Trill, the situation spiraled further out of control. General Threx's forces seized control of key military installations, including several deterrence system emplacements. Mark knew they were walking a knife's edge. One wrong move could trigger the system's failsafes, obliterating all life on the Trill homeworld. Sir, a junior officer approached, his voice shaking. General Threx is on the line. Mark took a deep breath and accepted the call. Threx's scarred face filled the screen, his eyes burning with hatred. This is your doing, human, Threx snarled. Your kind brought this plague of peace upon us. No more. The Trill will reclaim our destiny as conquerors of the stars. General, please, Mark implored. Think of your people. This path leads only to destruction. We can still find a peaceful... Threx cut the transmission. Mark slumped in his chair, the weight of two worlds crushing down upon him. He knew he had to act, and quickly. But with extremists on both sides pushing for war, and the deterrence system hanging over everything like the sword of Damocles, Mark felt truly lost for the first time in decades. Mark's eyes widened as the full scope of the crisis became clear. The deterrence system, his life's work, now threatened to ignite the very conflagration it was designed to prevent. He turned to Admiral Chen, his face grim. We have to shut it down, all of it. Chen's jaw dropped. You can't be serious. That's our only safeguard against... Against what? Mark snapped. Look at the screens. It's fueling this madness on both sides. We have to cut out the cancer before it kills us all. Mark assembled a strike team of his most trusted operatives. They boarded a stealth shuttle, its hull treated with experimental cloaking technology. As they approached the Trill homeworld, the extent of the chaos below became apparent. The capital burned, its skyline punctuated by plumes of smoke and sporadic weapons fire. They touched down in a bombed-out industrial sector. Mark led the way, his team moving in tight formation through the rubble-strewn streets. They encountered pockets of resistance, Threx's loyalists battling local militia. The team skirted the firefights, their mission too vital to risk direct engagement. At last, they reached the entrance to the subterranean nexus, a heavily fortified bunker, its blast doors sealed tight. Mark nodded to his tech specialist, who went to work on the security systems. Sweat beaded on the man's brow as he raced against time. The doors hissed open. They plunged into the darkness beyond, only to be met by a hail of plasma fire. Threx's guards had been waiting. Cover! Mark shouted, diving behind a console. The air filled with the acrid smell of ozone as bolts of superheated matter crisscrossed the chamber. Mark's team returned fire, their weapons set to stun. They couldn't risk damaging the delicate systems within. Inch by bloody inch, they fought their way deeper into the complex. Mark watched in anguish as good men and women fell around him, their bodies littering the sterile corridors. At last, they reached the central hub. Mark's fingers flew across the control panel, inputting the shutdown codes. A warning klaxon blared as the termination sequence began. "Sir," one of his remaining team members shouted, "we're cut off. Reactor's going critical. We'll never make it out in time." Mark's heart sank. He turned to his people, his voice steady. "Get to the escape pods. I'll finish this." As the last of his team reluctantly departed, Mark initiated the final sequence. The countdown began, each second ticking away with agonizing slowness. Suddenly the chamber shook. Debris rained down as a battered shuttle burst through the ceiling. The hatch opened, revealing a familiar face. "Jack?" Mark gasped. "Get in, you stubborn bastard," Jack shouted. "I'm not letting you die down here." Mark leapt aboard just as the reactor reached critical mass. The shuttle rocketed skyward, the heat of the explosion licking at its thrusters. They broke atmosphere, the Trill capital receding beneath them. Where the Nexus had stood, a massive crater smoldered. Across the planet, the deterrence platforms winked out one by one. Mark slumped in his seat, exhaustion and grief washing over him. He had stopped the immediate threat, but at what cost? As they set course for Earth, he knew the real work was just beginning. The fires of hatred and fear still burned, and he had no idea how to extinguish them.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.